Hello, children. I'll quickly review what we've covered in today's session. Now, if you remember in the previous class, we've learned about the different kind of earthquake waves. We've learned about what is the seismograph. We've learned what is the Richter scale. For today's class, the goal is to learn about the effects of an earthquake. We're going to learn about two effects of an earthquake. One is the constructive effect, one is the destructive effects. And then we'll do a small portion on the distribution of earthquakes. So let us begin. Now, what are the destructive effects of an earthquake? Destructive meaning your unfavorable effects. All right. So the common destructive effects of an earthquake could be the first is a large scale loss of human life. So the earthquake tremors take the lives of thousands of people, isn't it? Many are rendered homeless or suffer from severe injuries. So that is one very important destructive or very unfavorable effect of an earthquake, that is large scale damage of human life. Second, large scale destruction of transport communication network. As a result, it becomes difficult to help victims. Sometimes, if the earthquake is very high on a Richter scale, what happens? It can cause a lot of damage to transport. The roads can just fall off, crack in the roads. Even the communication line, the telephone lines could be affected, because of which it becomes very difficult to communicate and know about what is happening in the situation and help the victims. So that is the second effects of an earthquake. Third, large scale loss of property, shops, houses, and collapse of buildings. I'm sure you've noticed how shops get damaged, crack in the buildings. Sometimes the entire buildings could collapse if the earthquake magnitude is high, isn't it? So those are some of the destructive effects. And the next being your earthquakes, large scale movement can even cause floods to take place. If the vibration of the earthquake is massive, the massive impact of an earthquake, what will they do? They can cause a river to change its course. If the river is flowing like this, if this is a normal course of the river, but sometimes because of the movement, what happens, that this river could change its path and start flowing like this. So this can lead to flooding in many areas and again add to human suffering. So destructive effects could be loss of life. We've learned about transport, we've learned about property and floods, and they're more destructive. Now, next could be landslides. Sometimes landslides could be triggered because of the massive earthquake, especially hilly areas. So this can add additional damage and inconvenience. So because of the landslides occurring in hilly areas, because of the massive earthquake, sometimes the entire area could just slip off. Landslides could take place. So when landslides take place because of earthquake, that can lead to adding on the damage and even inconvenience caused to the people. Next. Next, destruction of earthquake, destruction of oil and gas. So how does destruction of oil and gas affects? So because when the pipelines, what happens when the pipelines laid under the ground are damaged or displaced, that can lead to fires. And the oil could leak and it can cause fire. So that is the damage that can be caused. Subsidence of coastal areas may submerge the lowlands. Sometimes earthquake can raise the area, sometimes earthquake could submerge. The subsidence earthquake can cause submergence of coastal parts. For example, Dwarka and Gujarat, which now lies submerged under the sea. So that could be one, destructive, damaging effects of an earthquake. How an entire area could just submerge. Next, due to upliftment of coastal areas, the depth of the water ports may become so less that the ports may become, the utility, the effectiveness of the port could be decreased. So because of the upliftment of coastal area, when the coastal areas rise up, all right, what would happen, the depth of the water becomes very less, the area of the water becomes very shallow. So when the water is shallow, the ports cannot operate, the ships cannot make movement because of the water being very shallow. So the ports could become very ineffective because of the upliftment of coastal areas. And the last and the most important destructive effects of an earthquake are tsunamis. This is important, you must remember what is a tsunami. So tsunami is basically known as harbor waves, because you would mostly associate tsunamis in the coastal areas. So that is why this is known as the harbor waves. When high intensity earthquake occur at the seabed, they may cause huge waves to occur. That is how tsunami waves takes place. So how tsunamis occur? Because of the high intensity earthquake occurring at the seabed, the bottom of the sea floor. When the movement of the plate takes place, this can lead to rise of huge water or sea waves causing tsunami. All right. Tsunamis are very damaging, okay, they're very intensive and damaging, and the destruction is really intense. So tsunami is basically the earthquake in the seabed generate massive waves called tsunami, causing immense damage to life, property in the coastal areas, and even it can affect tourism. Most of the areas which have been affected by tsunamis have been largely affected by tourism, because people refrain from going there. So because of that, notion that tsunamis, how tsunamis have left an impact, so people mostly refrain from going to that place. So that is how tourism also gets affected. And here they've given you an example of how earthquake had damaged Indonesia, which affected almost 2 lakh people, death of 2 lakh people. And one is in Tohoku, almost 16,000 people lost their life. So earthquake could be very damaging. It can cause a lot of lost human life, transport, communication, even landslides, fire. Coastal areas could be affected, and tsunamis are one great damaging or destructive effects of an earthquake. Now, moving to the constructive effects. What are the constructive effects? First, constructive meaning a favorable effects. So, inaccessible areas at higher areas are often lowered, and they may become more accessible. So, like I said, earthquake could either rise or lower parts of the earth's surface. So when it lowers parts of the earth's surface, especially areas which have been completely cut off, inaccessible, when they lower it down in size because of an earthquake, that same place could now become accessible. Okay, so that is one favorable effect of an earthquake. Rivers may change their course, which we've already learned, and they may bring new areas under cultivation. For example, if this is a river flowing, this is the normal course. Because of the earthquake, the same river starts flowing this side. So this area can become, favorable for agriculture, because river carries a lot of alluvium, which is fertile soil, which can add to the growth of crops. Underground deposits of minerals are brought sometimes because the displacement or the movement or lowering of the earth's surface, or rising up of the earth's surface. There could be many different minerals that could be discovered and brought near the earth's surface. Destruction of rocks may help in speedy weathering, and new soil is formed. Sometimes because of the earthquake, the vibration of the earthquake can lead to rocks, rubbing against each other and breaking down quickly. This When rocks break down quickly, what happens? Sediments are formed, and this sediments leads to the formation of new soil. Next, submergence of coastal areas increases the depth, thus could be useful for the development of ports. Like we learned, earthquake can either submerge, meaning it can either lower or it can either raise. So when it lowers, what happens? When it lowers the coastal area, the water becomes more deeper. When the water is deeper, meaning the ports can function, the ships can function. So it could be useful for the development and effectiveness of the ports. And sometimes because of the vibration, the seismic waves can even lead to new lakes being formed in many areas, which could become a source of water for those areas. So sometimes because a new lake could be discovered because of the rising up or the lowering of the earth's surface, so new lakes could be formed, and that lake could be utilized for many different purposes for the local people. Alright, so these are the constructive and destructive effects of an earthquake. Now moving to the distribution. Now earthquake and volcanoes share a very similar distribution. They are always associated with areas of folding and faulting. So, folding and faulting are two areas which are more common and frequent to earthquake and volcanoes. So, like the most important is circum-Pacific belt in the Pacific Ocean. All right, very popular. This is also known as Ring of Fire because of the large-scale amount of earthquake and volcanoes taking place in this area. So this is a circum-Pacific belt around the Pacific Ocean. Because of large scale, it is known as a ring of fire. Second is the Alps Mediterranean Asian belt, which is also known as the mid-world mountain belt. So this area includes it starts from the Alps, okay, and it passes through Turkey, Iran. About 31% of the world earthquake takes place in this area, the Alps. All right, that is why this is also important. And there are some other areas like the Indian Ocean. You can learn about Atlantic Ocean, which are also prone to earthquake. So that is about the distribution. You must know the distribution: circum-Pacific belt around the Pacific Ocean, the Alps in the Alps Mediterranean in the Alps, Turkey and Iran, and some minor areas like your Atlantic and Indian Ocean. Now this is the distribution map that's given here. How you can see Pacific, how it just you can see this red dots helps us to identify your regions of earthquake. So if you look here, it's just surrounding Pacific Ocean here, also Pacific and your mid-world mountain belt is here. So basically, earthquakes are mostly associated in the Circum-Pacific belt, mid-world mountain belt, or the Alp Mediterranean belt, and some minor areas. And these are some of the devastating damage that are caused because of earthquake, or how you can see how lives were damaged, houses were destroyed, people were killed because of different earthquake that took place around the world. All right, so that is it, and thank you, everyone.